Today, boys and girls, what we're going to do is we're going to compound our learning. We're going to learn more based upon stuff we've already learned. Now, what we've learned so far that there are global wind patterns. North of the equator, the global wind patterns create the trade winds, which are the strongest, most consistent winds on our planet, created by the Hadley cell. North of that, we have another cell of atmospheric circulation known as a Ferrel cell, and that creates the westerly winds on our planet. Same thing happens in the southern hemisphere. We're going to concentrate in the northern hemisphere because it's where we live. There's Cape Breton there in the North Atlantic. We have the trade winds blowing this way. We have the westerly winds blowing this way. So the trade winds blowing this way, what causes surface currents? We're going to talk now about surface currents, water currents in the North Atlantic. So what causes water currents? Well, the primary forces that cause surface currents in the world are wind. Primary forces start water moving and determine its velocity. Wind is a primary force. So wind blowing on the water transfers its energy. It creates a current where the trade winds are. It creates a current north of the equator called the NEC, the North Equatorial Current. The North Equatorial Current flows into the Gulf. This is the Gulf of Mexico. Right here you have Mexico. This is the Gulf of Mexico. There's another current that starts in the Gulf of Mexico and it flows up this way. And it's known as the Gulf Stream, supposedly the strongest, most consistent current in the world. The Gulf Stream current. It flows up in this direction. Oh, change this here a little. The Gulf Stream. Gulf Stream flows up, here's Cape Breton, flows up along the coast of North America up to here. Now, the reason I stopped the Gulf Stream here is because there's another current that comes down from Labrador. This is the coast of Labrador. The current comes down and mixes with the Gulf Stream, and it makes the water a little bit colder. So oceanographers have changed the name of the Gulf Stream here to the NAC, the North Atlantic Current, the NAC. That flows across to heat up Europe. Europe is much warmer than it is in America at the same latitude. For example, look at the winters we have in Cape Breton Island. This is the line of latitude. The line of latitude in Cape Breton is just below France. So Great Britain and Ireland are much higher north, yet it is much warmer, and that's because the Gulf Stream comes up here with all its water. It gets a little cooler, but it keeps going, goes up here and heats up that area. Pretty neat. Now, when the North Atlantic current hits off of Portugal, some goes north, some comes south. The current that comes south travels by the Canary Islands. And because it travels by the Canary Islands, it has the name the Canary Current. So here we have the four major currents that circulate in the North Atlantic. We have the North Atlantic Current, the Gulf Stream, the North Atlantic Current. Sorry, right here I said North Atlantic Current. I meant North Equatorial Current. We have the North Equatorial Current, the Gulf Stream, the North Atlantic Current, and the Canary Current, and they form a gyre. Now they rotate around. Now as they rotate around, and as the Earth spins, anything floating will end up here. It ends up a little off center because of the spin of the Earth. Now, that's interesting, because here we have an area called the Sargasso Sea. It's a sea inside of an ocean. And why it's called the Sargasso Sea is because sargassum weed, which is a seaweed, floats there. Traditionally, we think of seaweed as something that's stuck to the bottom. If you go down off the shores of Cape Breton Island, you will see down to the water, you will see kelp or eel grasses. Those are seaweeds that cling to the bottom, stick to the bottom. And that's traditional in our area. In this part of the world, there's a type of seaweed called sargassum weed, and it floats on the surface. There's a reason I'm telling you this. There's an interesting story that I heard a long time ago in Spain. This is Spain, right here. Spain gave the man generally accredited with finding the Americas, although there's all kinds of documentation that say the Vikings were here first and the Chinese were here before Columbus. But anyway, Columbus is generally accredited with discovering the New World. The people that gave Columbus the 3 ships that he used to sail here, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, were King Ferdinand and his wife Queen Isabella. King Ferdinand had just won a war in Spain. He'd thrown the Moors out of Spain and won a war with them, and he was kind of celebrating. And this guy, Christopher Columbus, who was an Italian, shows up on his doorstep and says, listen, I think I found a route to India, which would be over here. A shorter route, and if I can prove that route, it will be the shortest route to India, and I will make $1 bazillion for you. And King Ferdinand said, well, yeah, no, I think this guy is just a little insane and wouldn't have anything to do with Columbus. However, his wife, which you'll find as you study history, it's not so much that there are great men leaders, many of them had pretty intelligent wives that kind of steered them in the right direction, and I think there's a lot of that going on with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. But anyway, Queen Isabella later said to her husband, think about it. You have 100 ships. What are 3 ships? The man wants 3 ships. If he discovers the new route, you will be bigger than Trump. And Ferdinand thought, well, you know what, worst case scenario, I lose my 3 ships. So anyway, he's got 3 ships. He gives Columbus 3 ships. The Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Columbus takes his 3 ships, and now he's looking for a crew because he's going to sail out of, this is the Mediterranean, sail out of the Mediterranean, sail this way. Yeah, nobody wanted to sail with him because everybody at that time frame, we're talking 500-600 years ago, thought you'd sail off the end of the world. Everybody thought the earth was flat, except for Columbus apparently. So no one would sail with him. So he goes to the prisons and he says to the worst of the prisoners, murderers, the worst prisoners there, you come sail with me and I'll get you a pardon. So when you got a choice between hard labor in prison or jump on a sailing ship, what are you going to take? So they took the sailing ship, and they were his crew. His crew came from prisons. Now, can you imagine being on a ship and your crew on that ship had just gotten out of prison? Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to be skipper of those ships. Anyway, they sail down this way. They're sailing, trying to sail across the North Atlantic Ocean, thinking that they will hit India over here. They don't know that North America and South America are in the way. So right about here, after 40-some days of sailing, Columbus's crew are getting pretty scared. They're worried they're going to sail off the end of the world. So they say to Columbus, or they, not to Columbus, but they say to others, they start a mutiny. And they figure that one of these evenings, very soon, when Columbus goes to bed, someone's going to sneak in. Columbus is getting whacked. Well, lo and behold, just before that happens, someone finds seaweed. And they notice they're sailing into seaweed. And then the crew said, well, land must be close. There's seaweed, because the only place seaweed grows is close to land. Little did they know of Sargasso weed. And I guess it really doesn't matter, because that Sargasso weed floating in the sea, the Sargasso Sea, saved Columbus's life. Pretty interesting story, eh? So Columbus, within a week, landed on one of these islands, and there's all kinds of groups that say it was my island first. There's all kinds of groups that say Columbus is buried on my island, but that's perhaps a story for another lesson. Just to give you another quick overview in the lesson, the trade winds down here, the westerly winds here. Strongest, most consistent winds in the world, second. These winds are a primary force for surface currents. They start water moving and they determine its velocity. The water they start moving, the trade winds, start to north, equatorial current moving. North equatorial current flows up here to the Gulf of Mexico. This is the Gulf of Mexico. This is the origin of the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream comes up this way off of the coast of Newfoundland. There it mixes with the Labrador current that comes down, changes its characteristics a little, gets called the North Atlantic current. North Atlantic current goes over to Europe, bumps into Europe, some of it goes north, some of it goes down south. The stuff that goes down south sails by the Canary Islands, so it's called the Canary Current. And this is the North Atlantic Gyre, right here. Surface currents in the North Atlantic. Boys and girls, have a nice day.